the US administration announced a 31% tariff on South African goods. The tariffs have been put on hold for 3 months after a violent reaction from the stock markets. But farmers don't know what might come next.
The whole community, the workers, the pickers, it's just a lot of anxiety around. Nobody knows what's going on. They're looking at the leaders of the community to help us solve the problem. But for now, it's uncertainty, and in any uncertain environment, business doesn't thrive.
I am an African.
So tariffs, what are they? Tariffs are like a tax on imported goods to protect local industries. It's like your country grows rice, but your neighbor sells it cheaper. So the government adds a tax to the cheap rice to make your local rice look like a better deal. So what's all the hoopla about, and why is everyone talking about tariffs? Well, because current US President Donald Trump, aka the Donald, hit the world with tariffs, but China just hit the US with tariffs as well. So the US throws tariffs and China throws them right back. It's a full-on trade war. And while these two are ducking it out like heavyweight boxers, somehow, some way, Africa found a way to catch a stray. Now,
Usual.
in this video, we're going to be talking about the countries that are most affected by these tariffs. And some of the countries on this list are going to be a shocker. Because first on the list is Madagascar. Madagascar just got slapped with almost 50% tariffs. If your country had a trade deficit, a larger trade deficit with the US, then boom, you get hit with a tariff, like a crazy tariff. Generally, most countries were hit with 10%, but if your trade deficit with the US was much higher, in Donald Trump's mind, it means that the US is losing to you. So a trade deficit is basically something like when a country imports way more than it exports. So if the US is buying way more stuff from you than you're buying from them, then you have a trade deficit, right? And according to Donald Trump, he wants America first, right? So if there's a larger trade deficit with a country, then basically you get hit with a higher tariff. Now, the issue is there are countries that just have a competitive advantage in producing certain things than others, meaning that in certain products, the US might be a loser in because they don't have the ability to manufacture or produce that product, right? So you would expect that, like in the case of Madagascar, which exports a lot of vanilla and also clothes as well, and doesn't import that much stuff from the US. Maybe could be a geographical reason. It imports more stuff from China.
Mhm.
They got hit with the highest amount of tariffs on the African continent. And second on that list is actually Lesotho. Lesotho just got hit with 40% hike, with a 40% hike in tariffs as well, which is wild for a country that's landlocked, small, and peaceful. Right? Nobody knows much about Lesotho. Like Lesotho doesn't even make the news unless, of course, you have a trade
Lesotho is
deficit
famous
with the
for,
red, white, and blue.
yeah.
Sorry.
Lesotho is famous for uh the outfits that they wear, the blankets, which are like designed for
Ah, right, right, right,
high
right.
climate. Lesotho is a very high climate area. It's AKA the Mountain Kingdom
Mm-hmm.
because it's got lots of mountains. And then also another interesting fun fact, which could be a podcast in itself. Lesotho provides water to South Africa. Like it's South Africa is very
Really?
reliant on Lesotho for water. Um, I think 60% of South Africa's biggest province in terms of economic power. So where Johannesburg is, where Pretoria is, it's a province called Gauteng. Uh, 60.
Gauteng.
I might get the facts wrong, but almost half or around half of the water supply to that province comes from Lesotho, because they make like tons of dams, and then they supply
Ah,
water to South Africa. So, and it's also a
yeah.
monarchy. It's the only one of three monarchies in Africa. It's a constitutional monarchy, unlike Eswatini, the more famous one, which is an absolute monarchy. So the king has less powers. Basically, they have a prime minister
Mm,
who's the powerful guy.
crazy. And they're actually a major exporter of clothes as well. T-shirts, jeans, jackets, a whole lot
Big
of
big
stuff that was
brands like
headed to.
Levi, Nike,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I think Ralph Lauren as
No,
well,
not
maybe.
Nike. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, all those things are going to be more expensive for the US. Again, Lesotho is a country that doesn't really import much from the United States. As you can imagine, it's literally surrounded by South Africa. So most of its imports are going to come from South Africa or the neighboring countries, right? And moving on to our next country, which is Botswana, right? And Botswana just got a good old lesson in Trumponomics because it turns out diamonds do not last forever, right? If you didn't get that, Botswana is a big exporter of diamonds, and they export a lot of diamonds to the U.S. and the U.S. now slaps a tariff on them, and so diamonds are also well for American citizens are about to get really really expensive, right?
But this goes to
And
the thing that you said before,
yep,
like comparative advantage. How much
hmm
diamonds does America produce for them to
that's a
fill that
good
gap?
question.
Like,
Exactly.
there's just some things that America probably doesn't have.
Exactly. It doesn't. It's sometimes it doesn't really make sense because it's like, wait, of course you're going to have a trade deficit with this country. You don't manufacture that. That good. It's literally an example of Lesotho and South Africa. It's like South Africa getting mad at Lesotho, like, why did you guys have so much water? Like, like I'm gonna slap a tariff on you guys because you guys, you guys are giving
Yeah,
us water, right? And
yeah. And the
yeah,
main
so
main
as well.
import. So as you just
Mhm.
checking some of the like stats, the main top origins for imports into Lesotho come from South Africa, China, Chinese
Mhm.
Taipei, which is also known as Taiwan. Interesting, and
Interesting.
Japan and India. So United States is not there
hmm
in the top
And
five.
yeah, exactly. So again, this is another country that doesn't import a lot from the United States, and I think the reason why a lot of people are getting stuff from China is because, of course, the cost of production in the U.S. is much higher than in China, right? Particularly, of course, labor cost, which brings in a whole argument of ethical issues. But I mean, things from China are generally cheaper than things from the United States. Hence, why a lot of countries, particularly poor countries in Africa, are getting stuff from there. Now, yeah, speaking about diamonds, so, literally nearly $500 million of diamonds is now subject to 40% in tariffs, right? So this is going to hurt a lot of rappers who wear a lot of iced out chains, and they might have to switch and start wearing those macaroni necklaces that kids make in kindergarten. And yeah, so it's a lot of crazy stuff going on in with the diamonds as well with Botswana, and finally, of course, the last country that's just been slapped by the United States in Africa, which is definitely on the top of Donald Trump's list, is South Africa. South Africa, a country that not only was had its funding or aid taken away from it, the ambassador got recently got
Yeah,
kicked
South
out.
Africa's had a very bad year.
Precisely, precisely. So Mzansi, as it's known locally, just got hit with a 30% tariff, and the Amapiano Nation exports to the U.S. I was actually shocked to see this, but they export cars as well. So wine, citrus, among a plethora of other things, right? All of it also just got slapped with 30% tariff. So that makes life a little bit harder for Ramaphosa in South Africa. And again, South Africa doesn't import that it imports from the US, but not as much. Hence, it got a lesser tariff than the other countries that were mentioned. So in conclusion, what we see is jeans, diamond suits, and cars, amongst other things, are about to get a lot more expensive for U.S. consumers. And that's not just bad news for shoppers. It could seriously reduce demand and revenue for African countries that rely on these exports. Now, many nations were already scrambling to adjust to the US tariff. Then, boom, China just recently retaliated. Again, your question might be, how does that affect Africa? Well, a lot of African economies depend on exporting to countries like China and the US. But here's the catch: the US is also a huge buyer of Chinese products. So if China takes a financial hit, it may have less money to spend on the African raw materials, which means shrinking markets and shrinking opportunities. Some of these new tariffs have been paused for now, but the tariffs on China still standing strong. And in any case, one thing is clear: no one really wins in a trade war. The big players throw punches, and it's the local workers, the farmers, the factory workers who feel the pain.
I am an African.